Colleagues, I'm back. We have resolved the issue with the Deputy Minister, David Mahlobo. Unfortunately, he got the wrong time. He thought that we would be starting at 2 o'clock with the commissions. So he did indicate that he will try to join us. He is driving from Pretoria. Most probably he'll be here in the next 30 minutes to 40 minutes, but we can proceed with our program without wasting any further time. So, quickly, let me introduce myself. My name is Dr. Tina Nzo. I am from the Public Affairs Research Institute. I run the local government program, and I've been asked by the Human Rights Commission to help to facilitate this session, specifically looking at water, sanitation, and human settlement. And just to provide just a brief context within 2 minutes, yesterday we had the opportunity of listening to various speakers who spoke about some of the challenges that local government is facing. And one of the things that came out quite startling yesterday in yesterday's presentation for me was the Auditor General's report, where we have seen that the Auditor General, in terms of their language, it has now shifted from just only talking about the MFMA outcomes, procurement, compliance, and also just looking at the state of governance and administration. But they started to look at what we call a citizen-centric driven approach in understanding what audit outcomes really mean to the lived experiences of communities and their everyday encounters with local government through service delivery and infrastructure. And one of the most critical elements that was shown to us yesterday was the fact that most municipalities are experiencing an infrastructural collapse, particularly when it comes to water and sanitation. And fortunately, we also had the commissioner from the Gauteng province who provided us with a case study scenario of Informal municipality that they had been trying to deal with for many years concerning the water and sanitation over spillages that has started to have an effect on the health of communities, and also the infrastructure that is no longer holding the population that is living in that municipality. So at this point in time, we are going to be joined by Minister Mamoluko Kubai, who is the political head for human settlement. As we know, human settlement, water, sanitation are very interrelated infrastructure issues. And therefore, we cannot speak about human settlement without talking about the fundamental services that has to come through. And Minister, we would like you to provide us, with a synopsis on the kind of status that we have in human settlements, especially taking into account that our urban municipalities are experiencing a high population rate, and there is very little effort that is being made by metropolitan areas to secure or release land that can provide social housing. I mean, I wrote an article about the social housing crisis that is experienced by the city of Cape Town in June last year, where we now have a new settlement called COVID-19 that was established 2 years ago at the beginning of COVID, that now has about 24,000 households without houses, without water, without sanitation. And it means that, the urban gentrification is becoming a big problem. So it will be very interesting to get your perspective in terms of really telling us what can we really look for in terms of the solutions, so that we can debate about these issues and also find the probable solutions that the president needs to put forward. So let me just hand over to you, and thank you very much for giving us your time.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I kindly ask that I have a co-scribe, since I am facilitating? Is there anybody who would like to volunteer to co-scribe with me, so that we don't miss the important points before we begin? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nzo. Good morning, colleagues. I was asked to focus on the urbanization as part of this, but we can cover quite a number of issues. And I hope, as we agreed to the time frame that is given, I can keep to that time. I'm going to try my best. The first issue, perhaps, that we're looking at when we deal with the urbanization, it's around movement of people, migration of people from rural areas or forever, and then they come into the urban areas. And that puts pressure on cities, whether it's your metros or secondary cities. And that leads to what we call your informal settlement. So COVID-19, for example, in Cape Town, maybe just to correct you, is not a social housing. It's an informal settlement. We do have social housing. It's a different category, so we'll just clarify. Because social housing is what we are providing as part of the solutions for urban migration into urban areas. Now, when majority of these people come, we've done an analysis to look at who these people are. You find, one, they come into urban areas particularly for better opportunities, because they want to be closer to work or to look for work opportunities. Others are coming as students, end up in student res, but eventually when they complete school, they don't leave and they stay. So some of these people, one is that they come from urban areas, and others come, for example, they'll come from a township where it was an old house, what we call old stock, government houses, your 4-room houses, where children grow and then they start moving out of those houses. Either they stay as backyard dwellers, or they then move into informal settlements. Now, others would argue as well to say majority of the people that you find in informal settlements would be your migrants outside the borders of the country. So you have migration between rural and urban, migration between countries, which ends up in the city. And then you'll have those that would have stayed in communities, and then because of the growth of the family, while they can afford, then they either stay as backyard or they move into informal settlements. In response to this, we developed a program called Informal Settlement Upgrading Program. This program, we're currently having almost around 3,600 counting, and I say counting, of informal settlements. Counting because we're finding a lot of illegal occupation of land where people settle, and municipalities are not able to evict within the time that they are able to evict. And that's why you have that. Like COVID-19 happened during COVID time, municipality didn't evict. You look at wetland as well, closer to COVID-19, happened during COVID time, municipality didn't evict. Quite a number of them across. Johannesburg as well was one of the notorious ones during COVID, didn't evict. And Ekurhuleni is the one that did. I think they managed the new informal settlements. And I'll say why we're not pro new settlements or these illegal occupations, and many would differ with us sometimes, but because they deny us the opportunity of planning. So when we do informal settlements, they've got 3 phases. One, in terms of identification of land, where they are sitting, if it's an area that we have, they're already settled and we have decided to upgrade it, whether the land is suitable for human settlement. So it will require the formalization of that area. We work jointly with the municipalities. There are still challenges in terms of the turnaround time in municipalities, specifically in terms of planning. Because the planning units, you find that sometimes they do not have enough capacity to be able to approve in time for us to be able to define those as settlements. Then out of that, then we will provide with services, which is temporary services. Out of those temporary services, once it's formal, or when it's done, like they are there, we provide temporary services until the municipality can declare it as a formal area for location. Then it's then that we can be able to provide permanent services such as bulk infrastructure, where you put water, sanitation, and electricity. That's the responsibility of human settlements. And I know that sometimes there's intertwined confusion between what human settlements as a department provides and what the Department of Water and Sanitation provides. And I know dear Mahlobo will come later, but within the communities, when we do this upgrading, we are responsible for those, the upgrading of that and provision of. In terms of the challenges we have there of human rights, is that you'd find communities, for example, where you would find informal settlements, they would not be registered, they would not be known, especially by us at national. And therefore the communication between the three spheres of government, sometimes when it lacks, then you find this violation of human rights, because the fact that people don't have even temporary toilets, it's a human rights violation. Whether we've left them there, especially if we've not been able to evict them, we have the obligation based on the Constitution to provide such. Now that's the problem. Then part of our response beyond the informal settlement upgrade, I'm trying to move with the time. It's the response in terms of social housing. Social housing, what we do, it's people that are within the urban areas. These are what we call missing middle. They do not qualify for a grant or for a PNG, which we commonly call RDPs. But the banks are not approving them for bonds. So it's people who would earn between 3.5 and 22,000. Those that are the people that we support through a program called Help Me Buy a House. We subsidize them to be able to buy an affordable accommodation. These are apartments that we build within the cities. Part of why we're promoting social housing is to close the apartheid spatial planning, because you'll find majority of the people are outside. These are not standalone houses, but they are more apartment types. So they help us to close that, because we build within your inner cities, whether it's inside Johannesburg, whether it's inside Tshwane, whether it's Pretoria, whether it's inside Port Elizabeth, in Kabeja, in terms of the areas we are able to build within those space. Now, this, what we do, it's got two components. And I'll make an example. You'd have a Mamuloko who comes from Limpopo, who has built a house in Limpopo but works in Gauteng. He has no intention of staying in Gauteng and buying a house, but needs a place to stay. So sometimes they end up in informal settlements, because the rental space, in terms of, let's say, I'm working in Sandton, I can't afford unless there's affordable social housing. So that's where we close the gap and we provide the affordable rental stock. So that's what we call, in terms of social housing, they will have a component of rental stock and the component of buying of an affordable house, where a person has an income and they can be able to pay. But ordinarily when they go to banks, they would not be able to. So this is another response that we're providing in terms of urbanization. We've done a study. We will be launching as South Africa. We're leading in terms of the research and development around how to deal with or eradicate informal settlement and what we call informal settlements across the globe. The UN Habitat will be in the country, because we've done that study. And as we're piloting with our upgrading phases, learning out of that, being able to go and give some of these issues, but it doesn't mean that we do not have those challenges. So the urban development program, that continues to be a part of the challenge. We have looked at the stats. It tells us that in the rate where South Africa is, you are going to have almost around 80% of the population living in urban areas by 2050. So this is the burden that we're currently trying to resolve as human settlement and paying attention to them. So I don't want to go long. I think I've passed my 5 minutes, program director, but I'm here. We can engage. As thought, let me just give that in terms of the area that I've been given of urbanization. I didn't want to go into detail, but we can, in terms of a land release program that we have, because even Minister of Human Settlement can expropriate land without compensation for the public good. And we're currently now starting to do that, where we think that people should be able to be located properly and stay area, because it's one of our challenges in terms of availability of land within the areas that we have to build for the people. Thanks.
No, you kept your time, Minister. Thank you very much. I actually like the point that you just made at the end, the issue of land, because it's one of the critical factors that I think local government is not moving quite steadfastly when it comes to the release of land for the different type of housing and settlements that should be provided in the main cities. And what is very interesting is that even during the time when there was public hearings and submissions that were supposed to be made on the expropriation of land, local government's voice was actually very silent, and yet they are the ones who have to initiate SPLUMA and sitting with a lot of land. Some of the land is privately owned but underutilized. So maybe that's one of the things that we should actually look at from a local government perspective to understand the implications on housing. Without wasting any further time, let me go on to the next speaker since Minister David Matlobo is not around. Do we have Mr. Anthony Weingart with us? All right, okay. Let me hand over to you, sir.
Thank you, Program Director. Good morning, Minister and colleagues and commissioners. I'm from the South African Human Rights Commission, the Northern Cape office in Uppington. I was tasked to speak about the role of water boards with specific reference to the Northern Cape. And we have until recently, we had the Sedibeng water board servicing parts of the Northern Cape, your Namakwa municipality and regions of the Valharts water scheme. Now, we've recently learned that Sedibeng Water Board was disestablished, and this was after years of poor financial management. And in the 1920 annual report, it was reported that local municipalities owed the Sedibeng Water Board 5 billion rand, and of that is approximately 1 billion from the Northern Cape municipalities. But we need to recognize that water boards play an important role when it comes to providing access to water, whether it's treated or untreated, to municipalities. Water boards are organs of state and established by the minister in terms of Section 28 of the Water Services Act. And its major role is to supply water to communities, but it also provides management services, training and support to local municipalities. It supplies treated and untreated water, and it also manages catchment areas and participate in water conservation where it operates. One should realize that the Northern Cape is a water scarce province, and the water boards manage pipelines of, I know in the Olifantshoek area, it's a pipeline of 70 kilometers. And from the Orange River to Springbok, it's about 100 kilometers of pipeline that the water boards need to manage and maintain. So there's huge impact when municipalities don't pay the, I'm trying to shorten it. Yeah, so there's huge impact when municipalities don't pay the accounts, and it hinders the service that the water boards needs to deliver. So when one looks at accountability between your water service authority and your water service provider in this instances, the relationships are managed through contracts. So everyone has its role within the contract. Now, the Act in Section 19 gives the minister at least some sort of insight into what is contained in those contracts and what the role of the water board is in terms of ensuring that water is being delivered. So the Constitution guarantees that we should have access to water, and local municipalities, in terms of Schedule 4 Part B, are responsible for potable water. Now, when one considers that the water boards are organs of state, and they also have that constitutional responsibility then to ensure that water is being delivered. So the question then arises, what happens when there is a situation where municipalities are not paying and the water board is under pressure to deliver? Now, the Act makes provision that water boards can limit supply, or they can even discontinue the supply of water to a municipality. And that has a huge impact on our right to have water. So there's conditions built into the Act as to when a water board can limit or discontinue water, and also what needs to be in place to ensure that at least communities have minimum level of water available should those discontinue or limitation took place. The problem arises when a limitation or discontinuation of water takes place. Normally they will send out notices and prepare for that situations. But the way the infrastructure in municipalities works is that municipality would access a certain amount of water from the water board. That water would be stored in reservoirs, and from that reservoirs, water would be reticulated to households. Now, when there's a discontinuation, normally municipalities would not be in a position to facilitate the water to the end user, because the reservoir will have a certain capacity, and once that capacity is used, your points furthest from the reservoir, those people would have no water. And municipalities then would not be in a position to provide emergency water, because people must have at least 10 liters of water per day in emergency situations, or 1,500 liters over a space of a week. So then it happens that people are without water for a duration of the limitation or the discontinuation, and even beyond that, because municipality now don't have access to the proper amounts of water. And even if the water is restored, it takes longer to reticulate the water throughout the towns, and that is becoming a problem, and we foresee so that it will get worse as communities grow, because municipalities in their planning, they don't rely on accurate stats. You will see that you have municipalities with integrated planning that have stats from 2016 that they use in 2022 to plan for services. And whereas community has grown, informal settlements are there, and you have situations where municipalities they do not cope because they don't have the accurate stats of the amount of people that are there. So just as in a way of going forward, and this is something that we have to think about. We have a situation now, Bloem Water is taking over the water boards in that service the Northern Cape. And if you have these historical debts and that in terms of the proclamation, Bloem Water needs to take over the liabilities as well. And you're starting from a foot where there's already indebtedness. And how will the new entity take over that role if it cannot collect from the municipalities? So, and what we found in our investigations is that municipalities cannot account for the amount of water that they are using. So people don't have water meters. Municipality they cannot account for water losses. There's no or aging infrastructure that municipality cannot repair. And I think we've seen it since yesterday that infrastructure remains a big problem. So now you have a new entity taking over. Municipality cannot account for the amount of water that they're going to use. So there will always be that recurring indebtedness. And how will we discipline municipality and also the end users? Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much for that input. I'm actually even worried about municipalities such as Richtersveld municipalities. That is going to be the host of the hydrogen green economy, and there is a projection that there might be about 25,000 people who are going to migrate into that area. And Richtersveld relies on borehole water. And currently, even in its own sanitation system, it uses the old honeysuckers, to get sanitation working. So it really brings out the kind of planning that we need to do and the capacity and the kind of support that municipalities should be getting to start planning for water, to start planning for human settlements, to start planning for sanitation, because we might end up, with another problem where we will have informal settlements just erupting in that municipality. So you're giving us a thought to think about while we are digesting these issues. And let me call the second presenter, and that is Dr. Trevor Ngwane. He is from the Center for Sociological Research and Practice. Over to you, Doc.
Thank you very much. Such an honor to speak here. Yeah, so because there isn't much time, I'll just cut to the chase. And in fact, maybe just make a small comment to the previous speakers so that it's clear in the minds of the audience and you have a conversation. So I think that the main problem when it comes to water, electricity, housing, and other basic services, it's a clash of two visions. So I think this came out clearly from what the previous speakers were talking about. So there's a vision which was embraced by President Nelson Mandela in 1994 and by everyone, a better life for all. And then as a result, the first election manifesto of the African National Congress, the ANC, was the Reconstruction and Development Program, the RDP. You all know that till today, government-provided low-cost houses are called RDP houses. Yeah, but does that policy still exist, Minister? It was killed in 1996 when the RDP program was replaced by GEAR. Now, GEAR, it's a profit-driven, top-down, trickle-down, Washington consensus approach to the provision of services, what we can call, using shorthand, a neoliberal approach. It puts profit before the people. Just now, I was so happy because the president, in his speech, he was complaining about outsourcing, the ridiculous situation where municipalities have got employees employed to do something, but service providers are brought in to actually provide the service. And the president was suggesting that this is not only wasteful, but it smacks of corruption. Okay. And then this comes from the idea that the public service must actually be a platform, an avenue for people to make money, entrepreneurship, government contracts, etc., etc. So instead of capacitating the public sector, we actually open doors for private companies, private individuals to make money from providing services. So that is the clash of vision, you know, a better life for all or profits for a few. Now, when the minister says, with all due respect, urbanization, it's a burden. You see, this is the thing. Urbanization is something which is going to happen anyway. Yeah, it should not be viewed as a burden. So there's a tendency to look at these problems from the point of view of the minister, the point of view of big business, the point of view of profit, where when you spend money on the people, spend money on making sure that the children sleep with food in their stomach, it's viewed as a cost which must be avoided. Okay, yeah. So just now, you know, the previous speaker about water, you know, is complaining about the need to actually, you know, we have to measure how much water is being used. Of course, we must measure how much water is being used, but we shouldn't measure it in order to so-called make people pay. We should measure it to make sure that everyone gets enough for their needs. This is you know, it sounds like the same thing, but it's not. It's not. So we come up with policies, programs to ensure that, you know, no child sleeps hungry, that every granny gets enough water to drink, that everyone has got enough energy, electricity to keep their medication unruined in their refrigerator. Okay, okay, I could, even if you use an economistic, you know, narrow view, of course, if people get sick, the government must at some point pay because they end up going to that same hospital. And then when there are queues in the hospital, then you hear the Minister of Health is now complaining, there are too many patients. It's just a point of view. Today, we have a situation with electricity where ESCOM, you know, the national provider company, doesn't want people to use electricity. You know, we must use less, you know, because we're not able to generate enough. Of course, it's good to use less from an ecological, environmental point of view. But their point of view is from money because they are thinking it's privatization, is commercialization, is indeed financialization. Financialization is something people never think, but we all know that today electricity, water is being treated like a good and service, you know, which people must buy and sell. Indeed, there is the principle, neoliberal principle, user must pay. If you don't have money to buy water, stay without water. This doesn't make sense. You know, what a developmental state. You know, we come from years of, you know, apartheid. So I'm just trying to sketch out a broad critique. And then to be more specific, you know, because I was asked to talk about the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So the UN says by 2030, all governments must make sure that you know, all people have got enough water and sanitation. Okay, the government of the ANC through the National Development Plan, you know, is committed to ensuring that by 2030, everyone in South Africa has access to clean running water in their homes. But the problem is that, you know, given that move from providing for all, you know, from prioritizing the needs of the people to this commercial privatization thing, it becomes a clash, it becomes a contradiction, it becomes a struggle to actually reach those goals. I think I've given a few examples, but just to go back in history, so there was a time when the Johannesburg City Council. Fortunately, I had a close-up of this because at that time, I was an ANC ward councillor in Soweto. So suddenly, the municipality of Johannesburg said, we have to privatize almost everything. You know, we must privatize the libraries, privatize, I don't know, the roads. So this was a neoliberal shift by the ANC government, you know, to the right, so to speak, away from the RDP, away from the vision of social democracy, of a better life for all, towards trickle down. The trickle down is about the way to improve people's lives. You must first make the few to be rich so that there's economic growth. And then from those profits, you know, we can tax them and everyone can eat. So here we were. We're now the first democratically elected councillors, you know, in Johannesburg, 1995. We had gone in there with the ticket of the RDP, people-centered, people-driven development. Suddenly, in 1996, the ANC government moves away from the RDP to gear, to neoliberalism. Now we're being told that we're going to privatize everything. Next thing, when it came to water, you know, there was what is called corporatization. A water company, Johannesburg Water, was set up. So instead of the management of water being done by a department in the municipality, we now had a standalone corporate called Johannesburg Water. The next step was to get a French multinational company, okay, a big corporation called Suez, to come in and manage Johannesburg Water. And its first program was something called Operation Dzinamanzi, which was first implemented in Soweto, in Piri, one of the poorest areas actually in Soweto. And their idea was to install prepaid water meters. Yes, they were measuring the water, but they are not measuring the water to make sure that every granny gets enough water. They were measuring to make sure that granny pays for the water. Okay?
Dr. Ngwane, yes. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but our time is really becoming very limited because we want our participants to participate in the discussion. So can I ask you to just bring us to the future in 2 minutes?
Thank you. Yeah, what I was going to say, usually the chair says 1 minute left, you know, so it's not like you're doing the wrong thing. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so, okay, I think you get that idea. So, you know, the residents, they fought against this installation of prepaid water. It went to the High Court, it went to the Appeal Court. They only lost it at the Constitutional Court. I don't know what the judges were up to, but that's what happened. Yeah. So what I'm trying to say is that granny in Piri, Soweto, you know, because we have to view things from the point of view of ordinary people. So that granny, she knows that there's something called the Department of Water, DWS. She knows that there's something called ESCOM. She knows that there's something called the Minister of Human Settlements. But basically, that granny just wants a secure, comfortable life. She just wants to be sure that when she goes to sleep in the morning, there'll be food for her grandchildren. There'll be enough water to wash in the morning. There'll be electricity, you know, to warm that water, warm her, you know. When she's sick, she can go to a clinic which works. So what I'm pushing for, which is why I'm talking about these broad issues of neoliberalism, commercialization, user must pay, put the people first, is that our focus should be to ensure that the life of ordinary people, you know, is easy, is comfortable, is secure. So if you can unite around that, we'll find that actually this ideology of putting profit before the people contradicts Batupili. And in fact, my last point, Chair, because you said 2 minutes, although I said the president spoke well about outsourcing, but his plan of solving the energy crisis involves privatization, commercialization, financialization. Remember, he wants to break down ESCOM into 3 units: generation, distribution, and transmission. And then he wants to bring in the private sector into generation, okay? And bring in the private sector into distribution. Already, the so-called IPPs, independent power producers, who will provide us with green energy, those are private companies. If you look in your newspaper, there is Nedbank competing with ABSA. ABSA says, no, if you want to build these green plants, I can give you money. What it means is that, the provision of electricity will be tied up with how much finance those private companies get. So basically, it's financialization. I don't think is the way out. I don't think that granny in Piri, Soweto will be assured of enough electricity if the big banks are now the ones who decide who must get electricity and who must not. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ngwane. We clearly do get the message of the denationalization and the nationalization of services involving privatization and non-privatization. But at the end of the day, we need to stick to our commitment to the SDG, especially SDG number 6 in the provision of water as a constitutional obligation by government. Yes, yes, sir.
Quite eloquently. I listened to what the president said. One is the learnings, solutions, proposals as to how to deal with the strengthening of this sector. Now, the fact that we're going to be going out of this place at 1 o'clock, it leaves us with a very little time to deal with the critical areas of how do we assist, what proposals are really upcoming, because they have to be deep-seated, well-thought-out proposals. Yesterday we listened to problems. Today we're listening to problems. If we're 3 days, I mean maybe 4 days, 2 days is for problems, and then 2 days is for looking at solutions. Maybe that would be okay. But that's my concern, Chairperson.
And maybe that's the proposal that we should work towards as we're about to conclude. Unfortunately, we now have the Deputy Minister, Mr. David Mahlobo, who's going to most probably give us some of their policy thinking behind in terms of finding solutions, because he is well aware of the water problems that we are faced with. I'm not going to repeat any of the stuff because the department knows exactly. I mean, last week we also had the Minister Mkhunu, who actually made a press briefing telling us about the situation of water and some of the plans that they are going to do to resolve this issue. So, Deputy Minister, let me give you the time to just take us through some of those proposals that you might have.
Thank you very much, Program Director, to my colleague and my sister, Comrade Minister Gupai, Comrade Keynes, and thanks for alerting me. My apology, the change of times, we're not informed. I'll be brief because I don't want you to hold you back. With respect to water, we look at the national plan, which is the NDP. We also look at the Sustainable Development Goals, which is goal number 6, which is our contribution to the UN imperatives as a global community, because we play in that particular space, including the issue of the Lost Star for Africa, which is Vision 2063. South Africa, we're going to be one of those countries that will have recorded significant progress, especially if you look now in the last 28 years. Access to many people that were denied both access as a human rights issue, but also the economic benefits to water and sanitation. As a country, we've made significant strides. As we speak, the latest statistics by Stats SA, which is the official repository of statistics in South Africa, we are currently around 90% of South Africans that have access into water, but we have also recorded about 88% access to various sanitation services. we must then also be able to admit that this ANC government now is a sixth administration. We've done a lot, but we're the first to admit that there are people who have not reached. When it comes to water, there are still the issues of the security of availability of water. That security availability of water is becoming more acute on the basis that the population has grown, the economy has grown. In other words, water as an input, there's a lot of demand to it. And then the issues of climate change, they're also coming into account in terms of issues of availability. Remember, we remain one of the driest countries in the world. In terms of the world average, we are hovering around 50% in terms of the rainfall that we receive, including our own region. And at the very same time, we don't have many rivers. We normally share our rivers with our neighbors, which are in SADC. And it's a very important issue that there are those shared river basins. Our decision is to say that we'll have to implore and do a number of things to build a lot of infrastructure to ensure the security of the availability of the resource. It's going to be one of the biggest things. That's why you could see that in the country's economic reconstruction recovery plan, one of the key issues in the network industry is the investment in water infrastructure, let alone the nexus around the investment in energy and others because of the issues of the link. And in our case, there are a number of projects that are the biggest projects that we're doing. We are proceeding with the question of Lesotho Highlands Phase 2. And all the nitty-gritties that were causing us problems have been resolved between the countries that are there. In other words, we'll proceed with the issues of the Polyhali Dam to ensure the issues of the security of supply. But if you look at KwaZulu-Natal, its growth potential has been held back over quite some time. We should be able to proceed with Umkomazi there, which is one of the biggest projects that will cover 5 districts in KwaZulu-Natal and stimulate that particular corridor so that we don't have problems. At this stage, we've concluded with all those affected municipalities there to build, it's a more than 25 billion rand project. We should be in a position now to go with Treasury, with our TCTA as an implementing agent to go to the market and be able to find the resources to do that. In the Eastern Cape, the old problem of Umzimvubu that has the biggest potential there, where you could actually stimulate the economy from nowhere. At this stage, we are very pleased that the private sector has an appetite to come into the party. We are now negotiating with the preferred bid around the good terms to say, how can we actually ensure that there is water for domestic use in that site? But we also go for green energy, which is the issues of hydro, but also promotion of the stimulation of agriculture from nowhere, because if you look at the Ntabelang Dam and the others, it could play an important point. We have a number of these projects, including the support to mining around the question of in the Northern Cape. In the Northern Cape, you have something called Valhamahar. Currently, we are concluding phase 1, we're going to phase 2. There are a number of them, but in the next 10 years, we are looking to about 130 billion rands, if we speak about the current present value, just to ensure that there is a security of supply. But we are not only looking at in terms of doing more dams, doing this and this and this, but South Africa has also the potential that we can reuse water, because there's a lot of wastewater that we produce. Here in Gauteng, an example, they have one of the biggest wastewater treatment plant, the Northern Works there. It carries more than 400 million liters per day of wastewater. That goes to artists and so forth and cause a lot of pollution. One of the things that we are saying is that wastewater can actually become the brown economy. Therefore, the use of effluent for other sectors of the economy is going to be the biggest issue that we'll do. And there is an appetite. In Limpopo, there's an example of Mkhalakwena. Ivan plans a partnership between government and private sector where they are actually building wastewater treatment plant because they want to use the effluent. And we want to be able to use it more and more. Then the issues of the other available water, normally the pollution in the mines. We want to do mine water reclamation. There are high levels of toxins and so forth. We should be able to do that in terms of acid mine drainage, especially here in Gauteng and the other parts of Mpumalanga, Northwest, including KwaZulu-Natal, because every drop will be able to do. Those are some of the aspects of making more water available. But in areas where there is no infrastructure, especially in access to infrastructure at all, groundwater remains one of the biggest potential that we need to explore. It does not mean it's an inferior quality when we talk about groundwater, but it has to be used and it should be the proper scheme. And then around coastal cities, we'll then be able to use the seawater, which is the desalination, and in terms of technologies. In other words, we are addressing the question where water will come from, because where water will come from is an important issue, and we don't have an abundance of water in our country. Therefore, the issues of deploying necessary technologies to be able to treat water, including other aspects, will be very important. On delivery, there have been setbacks. One of the setbacks is around the issues of institutional capacity. There are those people who used to have water yesterday. Our reliability of supply has declined all over the country. In the main, the infrastructure is no longer at the right conditions. Over 60 years, 70 years, infrastructure has collapsed. One of the biggest issues is to say, let's ensure that those that had water yesterday, because we're losing close to 40% of the water. When you lose 40%, there are those metros who are losing more than 52%. The water losses in the main, they're an infrastructure function, because the infrastructure function is a weakness that we have done, where we expanded, but we never actually attended to the concomitant issues around ensuring them, putting now enough investment, managing like you manage your own car. Therefore, one of the biggest things that we're doing is to revamp all the infrastructure so that the assurance of supply can be guaranteed. If the assurance of supply is guaranteed, there is going to be citizen satisfaction or customer satisfaction. And when there is a customer satisfaction, we'll be able to collect the revenue and the economy will be able to thrive, but those are some of the issues. Therefore, investment in O&M and just management of infrastructure is the biggest project that is happening in main cities, including in rural communities. The other matter that we have to deal with is that because of infrastructure failure, there's a lot of issues of deterioration of water quality in our country on the basis of pollution. And the deterioration of water quality in the main is caused by the wastewater treatment works that are actually the capacity was not expanded when we were actually connecting people. There is no single municipality, whether run by the ANC, whether run by the DA or the IFP. There is no municipality in this country that does not have sewer spillage. All of them sewer is spilling on the basis that our infrastructure management, working with MISA, working with ourselves, including the private sector, we are trying to fix that problem. As you see us right now, we're in Amanskraal, we're at Mfuleni, and there are a number of areas where we are actually intervening, but people are living in inhumane conditions that are not safe, that are going to cause problems. What are we doing? We are saying that those municipalities that don't have capacity, we are deploying our water boards, because some of these water boards have a strong capacity that is available over time. Not all the water boards have the same strength. But if you look at the capacity of Rainwater, more than 100 years organization, internationally renowned, holding bonds, whether it's Zumgen and others, that's the deployment of capacity, including our own engineering capacity, working with international organization in terms of just bringing capacity to support. One of the other issue is also the capacity to plan, because water must be planned for in terms of options, in terms of scenario planning 2030, 2040, 2050, so that we'll be able to do the interventions on time, but also the capacity to implement, because most of our projects are not actually finishing on time. And some of them in the water sector, they've been there for the last 15, 20 years. They are incomplete projects. And we are actually prioritizing the completion of the projects using water boards, other implementing agents, including our own capacity that we've built over time as a department. The construction capability that we are talking about. The other matter that you ask us to address is that the country, if we need so much, where will money come from? Where will money come from? Our view, there is some money that is available in terms of the fiscals, whether it's MIG, whether which is a water component. And I know Minister will have spoken in terms of fair portfolio. Metros are supported with USDGs, or non-metros are supported by the SDGs, where there is a component for bulk infrastructure that includes water and sanitation. On our side, we have your RBIC, you have the WISIC, and we have invested billions of rands over time. And one of the problems we have is that these billions of rands that we've invested just in the last few years, there's a lot of infrastructure on the ground, but some of the infrastructure is not working. Therefore, the implementation and the monitoring is one of the things that we're going to do. But now that our growth and our economy, both in terms of the population and economic growth, we don't have all the money to deal with the issues of demand in South Africa. We have taken a decision to work with private sector. It's the right thing to do in terms of social compact. And unapologetically, the policy of the governing party when it comes to the economy is the mixed economy. In other words, there is a role of the state, there is a role of the private sector, depending on the conditions that we deal with from time to time. One of the things that we've done, we've created what we call it a water partnership office, working with the infrastructure SA, DBSA, and so forth. And this has started working. The biggest project that has been held back in the Northern Cape to support the mines and associated communities. Private sector came in working with us. We are just managing the question that the biggest burden, the premium must not be paid by the domestic use. In other words, that project that is called Valga Mahara is an example of a private sector investment. The very same thing here in Matibeng, in the Northwest in Brits. There are treatment plants that we are doing in terms of raw water. The mining sector has agreed to come on board to support us. The example I made of Umkhalakwena, where an investment in the mining economy of about 10 billion rand were able to save, where mines they were able to come in and support to build the infrastructure, which is a wastewater treatment plant and the raw water treatment plant. Those are some of the examples. Here in Limpopo, you check, there's a biggest dam called the Diwab Dam. That dam should be able to provide water to all those mines and the communities in the neighbor plateau, Bulugwane until to Mukopane. And our view, working with the mining sector, will be able to structure an agreement. That is a win-win, that they will be able to come in. The very same thing about the Makado Musina SEZ that has a potential of 150 billion minerals sitting underground. But water has become an impediment. Therefore, we'll be able to go to the markets and be able to do it. We are not commercializing water, but when it comes to issues of economy, more practical. Very practical in terms of the current fiscal arrangement that we work with. And in the department, we are proceeding now with the National Water Resource Infrastructure Agents, and where we'll be able to bring in our assets worth more than 110 billion rands. We will have your TCTA, and you will also have your construction unit. They will come in. That agents will be able to go to the market using that particular balance sheet and be able to do what we couldn't be in a position to do. The last 2 points that I must address, there is a view that we have commercialized water. The answer is no. The issue of water in South Africa is a human rights matter. Even in the National Water Act, is very clearly defined that the reserve, which is for human consumption, for current and future generation, international obligation, the ecology, including for strategic use, that one is guaranteed, whatever we do, even using the instrument of licensing. But what happens is that in as much as we need to be able to, for communities, the input cost around power, around the treatment cost, the issues of the skill that must be used, water must be actually be paid for. That's why we are proceeding with the independent economic regulator. We have already appointed commissioners now so that the issues of pricing of water becomes more consumer rate, so that we are able to do what we're supposed to do in terms of water security and assurance of supply, but then the other associated issues are attended to. Then the regulator is there now, but the principle that people must pay is a principle that is there international. There is a user pay principle. And in terms of how we do those particular issues, it's important. But those who can afford to pay, the reality is that this government has a social security network that no other country after the Second World War has ever done what we have done. Therefore, that's why in our case, we do have the contribution called the free basic water. It has a limit that there should be 6 kiloliters that must be given. Immediately you start to use more and you behave that it is plenty, it must be attended to. That's why municipalities are always given that in the equitable share, there is that particular provision to support the poor. But those who actually must pay, must pay. I could see the question was saying that are water boards allowed to stop water? Probably the question should be, is government allowed to stop water? Government is not allowed to stop water for human needs, which is constitutional. But government at the very same time, to be pragmatic, it caters for those that must be catered for in terms of its own policies. Those of us who are sitting here, we cannot owe water, we must pay. Like we must pay for electricity, pay for the data because we pay for the data, so that at least we can be able to keep this. But water boards, there is even a decision by courts who will not be able to totally stop water. But as an instrument around cost recovery, there is issues of the limitation. In other words, our restrict amounts, so that we can be paid. One of the things that is going to happen, the problem of ESCOM, you see, is going to be a picnic. The problem is going to be with water. The amount that is being owed to water board, it has escalated over the last few years to around 16 billion. And when it has escalated to around 16 billion, one municipality in the country owes 4.8 billion to water. And when they owe this money, a water board like Sedibeng were to make a very difficult decision to disestablish it. And how many water boards should we disestablish because people are not paying? But our attitude, we're not going to say municipalities must pay us, but we're also going to say water boards must help them around the fixing of the leaks, putting new infrastructure so that those who will be able to pay, they will be able to pay. I thought we should address that question because I could see when it suits people, when they take public platform, they send a message that we are irresponsible. We are a responsible government, but in the reality that the kind of the world we live in, there is no world that you can actually say the user pay principle must not happen. It's the same thing when it comes to pollution. We say that the polluter will have to pay. Why should we bear the brand and pay the premium for those who are polluting water? It's the very same thing about the mines that have polluted water in our country for decades. We'll be in a position to chase them, so that we should be able to do what we're supposed to do. We are very confident we're on the right track as government. We can improve. There are weaknesses, as there are certain communities that are still excluded. But at the very same time, we cannot actually allow ourselves to be bullied to retract as if there's not been any progress that has been made. We are shaping up well as national government, working with govt and the other stakeholders, human settlements, but municipalities, they remain our weakest link. And using the DDM, we think we should be able to intervene and support municipalities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Minister. That was quite comprehensive because you touched on many factors. And one of the factors that I think is a great priority for us is establishing do we have the finances to invest, in the water infrastructure, because currently we are faced with a huge detrimental factor that in the future populations are going to be violated in terms of the human rights if the state does not supply them with water. But on that remark, let me give to our last speaker, who will provide us with an innovative way of thinking about the ways in which we can try to look at other water resources. Doctor?
Thank you, colleagues. I'm going to be very brief. DM Mahlobo has covered a number of important issues, and I'm not going to repeat those. What I've done, I'm not sure that you can show the presentation, at least I sent through, okay, but that is fine. In the presentation, I had a diagram that shows the challenges that we face as a country in terms of climate action failure, extreme weather, biodiversity loss, livelihood crisis, social cohesion, erosion. And I was demonstrating how these impact on many, many other societal challenges. And now, when you look at the fact that extreme weather, climate change, and all that is not going away, you can see that our water sector is truly facing a myriad of problems that trying to solve them will be a lifelong journey. We have seen some of our two big cities in the country. About 3-4 years ago, we saw Cape Town facing a drought. The great infrastructure that we had invested on was not very helpful under those situations. There was simply no water. And then we saw Durban. Now look at the opposite. One is facing a drought, we have no water. Durban facing a flood. Destroying infrastructure results the same situation. Not only no water, but also a health crisis. So this illustrates the fact that yes, as a water sector trying to provide water and sanitation, it's an uphill battle. And so what I want to propose now is to say, yes, a lot of work is currently going on. There's a lot of planning and a lot of engagement. And all that is really well appreciated. And we have seen over the past years, the lives of many, many people are being changed. But while saying that, what I want to place on the table is that there are opportunities for more that we can do. Now, I want to state very clearly, the water sector, our water users have invested over the past 50 years on an organization known as the Water Research Commission, tasked with trying to find solutions that will take us into the future and ensuring that we have water or enough water as we go forward. We'll do our work being aware that in 2030, we'll come to fulfill a statement that says we don't have enough water as a country. So that becomes one of the drivers. So what I want to say, I just want to use one example on how we can actually disrupt this. And that example doesn't in any way try to replace all the efforts and the initiatives that are being done. But while we are working to solve the problem now, I believe, for example, in about 3 years, we could have at least this example that I want to use, a solution that will disrupt the whole thing. Now, when I talk about disruption, think about the cell phone, for example, how it disrupted the way we used to have our telecommunications 20, 30 years ago to what we have now. This unit that you see here has got more than 10,000 patents, and it's available to anyone in South Africa. High tech, at the hands of almost every individual. We can do that with sanitation, as an example. We can have a smart toilet ready in about 3 years. In fact, even maybe less than that. That smart toilet will not use water to flush. It will be a fully flushing toilet, but you'll only start with maybe 1 or 2 liters. After that, for the rest of your life, you don't have to add water. In fact, it might produce a bit of water for you. It won't take out any sewage, so it's completely out of the network. Now, this is something that will really disrupt, because then much of the pollution that is caused by sewage and all the challenges that DM referred to are eliminated. But that being a disruptor means a change in the way we think, a change in the way we adopt and use this technology. It means a step change. Now, why am I saying that? Government is our leader. They play a role in all these things. So there is work that needs to happen upfront in preparation for a disruptor like this one. Actually, this toilet I'm talking about, this smart sanitation solution, is already being demonstrated. We are studying it and measuring it and monitoring it. And there's great opportunities. What I'm trying to say, in 6-7 years' time, you can have a toilet. When you sit on it, it will measure your blood pressure, it will measure your cholesterol, it will measure all the medical things that you need measured on a daily basis, and they are uploaded and sent to your medical practitioner to check, and before you even know it, somebody knows that something is beginning to develop in your body. I sometimes say a joke, and I said, you know, you'll be sitting there and it sends you an SMS, congratulations, you are pregnant. So that's how we have to start thinking of it. But I'm saying we have disruptors like that. And you can begin to imagine that for a country like South Africa, whose major cities and major settlements are in the center of the country, what difference it will make. The second one that I want to use is in the recycling and reuse. And I'll use a simple example. Most of us do have swimming pools, and you can think about how long you have kept your water in the swimming pool. In my case, it's about 6 years, the same water, I'm just cleaning and recycling it. What about your bath water? What about your shower water? You know, should you be showering to draw away, or you could bath, and we have a bath that stores the water, cleans it, and you use it over and over again. You can see that we can build a society that is decentralized in terms of water usage, and that will actually help us to invest less and maintain infrastructure in the light of droughts and floods that we face, that we'll face in the future. That's what I wanted to share with you, colleagues, to say, yes, there's a lot of work that is happening, and we will be having some disruptors, but we need all of us to be working also towards those. There is a program being rolled out on school sanitation. It is possible for each and every school in South Africa to have a flushing toilet, and decentralized and working extremely well. We have it, I think, in at least 10 schools in the Eastern Cape, and it's working very well. I'm just introducing this for us to think, yes, we have a myriad of problems, but we can disrupt. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mandla-Msibi. You really speak like somebody who really is coming from a center of innovation. And that actually doesn't only talk to issues of water, but it also talks to the green environment, the green built environment that targets, human settlement. To what extent is the state willing to start working with innovators? I know that the University of Johannesburg, which is our sister university, is actually working on a project of green buildings, alternative building methods compared to bricks and mortar. So that's some of those innovative ideas that we need to bring to the forefront as we are modernizing as a state. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end, but at least my colleague has indicated that we do have 20 minutes to have our discussions and inputs, but it's fair enough to actually get some of your thoughts and ideas in terms of how do we really strengthen the capacity of the state to really address the issues of human settlement, water and sanitation, what other innovative methods can we actually start looking at, to make sure that we provide these elementary services, so that at the end of the day, we come with concrete proposals that we need to take to the president, and also taking into account that local government is our weakest link. So what it is that we need to do from a cooperative perspective in terms of giving local government that capacity. So let me open up to the floor. You can make extra contributions. And before I do so, let me just. Oh, okay, sorry. All right. Okay, so we've got our first person who will be raising a question. Do we have a second hand? Maybe I can take 2-3 hands at a go, and then we can have our participants respond. The second hand. That person. All right. Number 4. Okay, I'll take the first 4 rounds of questions.
Hi everyone, my name is Tandega Koza. I've got a few questions. I had 5, but 2 were already answered by the Deputy Minister. So I'm just going to run through them without elaborating too much, because they are, what is it called? They're 4 different speakers. So my first one was with regard to human settlements. So I wanted to ask the Minister, because I know that you mentioned that there are some breakdowns of communication with regard to getting numbers, right? For example, when you need to evict or rehouse people. So I wanted to ask, with the information that you do have, how many people needed assistance? And of those, how many people have been assisted to date with housing? And are the numbers that you have up to date or not so much? Especially considering, for example, COVID, I'm imagining more people would need assistance, and with regard to the floods in KZN as well. Yeah, that's it on that one. And then also to the Minister, are you cognizant of the first target under SDG 11? Because I know you mentioned like 1 sentence on the SDGs, but the housing that you are making available, is it safe, affordable, and accessible? So for example, we know that there are some open areas, but they're far away from wherever people work. So is it accessible close to the people who work? And are we cognizant of the minimum core obligations as well regarding the standard of the housing being made available? And then the last one is to the Deputy Minister of Water and Sanitation. So with regard to sewerage, I heard Deputy Minister mentioned a few points on effluent, for example, but this handling of sewerage, right? How are we doing on that? Because I heard a lot about the different ways in which we're providing water, but a lot of our sewage systems aren't working very well. And I mean, I'm not well versed on this, but I'm imagining that there's a lot of wasted water, or we're ending up with more effluent than we need to have in the first place. So basically, how are we handling, or how are we improving on our handle on the sewage in the country? Thank you.
And not also forgetting that we have certain these ratepayers associations who are starting to take over certain functions of municipalities. So that's one area that we need to carefully.
Thank you so much, Program Director. Thank you so much, Deputy Minister and Minister and other speakers. We have listened to the problems. In some instances, solutions were provided. I was thinking that maybe it will help us to request the presenters before we make proposals, whether in their understanding of the nature of the problems, what is it that they identified as a major issues to be addressed? It's just a proposal. For example, the Deputy Minister mentioned an issue of migration, internal migration and then external migration, and of course other related issues. The issue is whether the economic development of rural areas in the country, would that be a solution In other words, you stop migration because there is possibility of getting employment, addressing the issues and opportunities nearby rather than migrating to another place. Would that be a solution? That type of interaction would really assist. What are the issues in terms of water provision and sanitation, other than the beautiful, eloquent presentation that we have received, which is very beautiful? Is that a question of communication for communities not to know what is actually happening? A lot is being happening. And what is the major issue? Is the major issue communication, so that we can strengthen communication, whatever the case may be? Those are the type of things that I thought it will help going forward.
And maybe, Prof, you don't have to be so modest about it. Maybe you should actually say that we should be looking at decentralizing our economy back to the rural areas.
Thank you. My question is to the Deputy Minister. You did mention that some projects have taken so long, like 15 years, and it has not been resolved. And I think one of the things I picked from the last conversation, especially from Commissioner Tuli, was that there's a need for accountability. Has there been any accountability to ensure that this doesn't continue? Is there a consequence to ensure that these people that are actually holding the project back are being held responsible? And I think also, if it's taking 15 years, things would have changed. The project cost would have changed. The project plan would have changed. How are you going to accommodate that to ensure that these projects are actually then able to meet the needs of the people? The second is just a comment to what Doctor said, which is about the fact that Bill Gates is actually building sewage system to actually purify sewage system to enable them to give you clean water. And then it seems as if he's actually working with government departments in Africa. It might be a good thing to take a look at towards looking at innovations that can disrupt the system.
Right, our last input, a question.
Mine is a very short one to Deputy Minister. Minister, you also indicated about the water treatment plants that have been taking place around the country. For instance, the water treatment plant in Madibeng. You talked about the massive budget that have been allocated to the water treatment plants. Yesterday, in one of the plenary, we talked about the disruptions of those projects that have been identified in those water treatment plants or municipalities. So, what systems are in place to ensure that those water treatment plants see a day of completion? Because most of the issues that we raised are that corruption, is part of the things that ensure that the service delivery does not being delivered to communities. What systems are in place to ensure that those water treatment plants see a day of completion and there is no disruption of delivery of services to communities? Thanks.
Okay, I'll give the first round of response. Minister, do you want to go first?
No, thanks a lot. And I think I did indicate I'm going to apologize because I'm going to have to leave latest at 12 because I'd scheduled to go and be somewhere and I had to be late. The first one, I think more than anything, Tendeka raises quite a number of issues. The first one around the need for how many people we have and how do we know? We've got a system that we call the human settlement system. It's an electronic one, but it's not where we want it to be. It's not like a digital that is reliable because what it does is that you, just to explain the system, you register at a ward level with a councillor as a person that needs a house, or you go to our local offices in municipalities and then you register. That's why you find somebody saying, I've applied for a house, I'm still waiting. What happens is that when there's a development, we utilize local government, municipalities to finalize the beneficiary list. That's where we are finding a lot of manipulation. around the beneficiary list. There's been cases where councillors have sold houses to people, others have been arrested, and all those things. That has been some of the things that we started paying attention to. So we do have a database. We know how many people, or we have a number, but I can sit here and say it's not reliable. And that's why we've started a process. We're hoping to finish it by the end of this year, of a new digital platform for human settlements. We want to utilize it in the manner that you do with IEC, where you punch in a number. Anyone in any community can say, okay, this is an old woman who says, I've registered a house. You punch in the ID number to check where they are in the system. Have they been approved? Have they been allocated to a project? Because we do allocate on the beneficiary. As we build, then we allocate people to say this will be the beneficiaries. That's what we want to make. We want to avoid issues of manipulation, nepotism, but also improve accountability and transparency of provision of human settlements with that digital online platform where anyone can utilize it. So we actually hoping that by end of the year latest, would have launched it and people can utilize it. We believe it will be a major breakthrough for human settlements. What it will do as well, it will allow, for example, automatic prioritization of senior citizens. We have policies that currently are not observed because you'd have a senior citizen. We are saying our policy says if there's somebody who's an older 17-year-old and needing a house, they must be prioritized. And you find that as I go across the country, I find that they've not been prioritized. And that's why one of the things that we are doing is to start allowing the system to automatically move particular people, disabled people, and people who are elderly up the list automatically in terms of as they are captured. So that will assist us. So the number we've provided, almost about, we are saying we've got a needs in terms of our needs registry. We're sitting at about 3 million of people who are needing houses. But what we are picking up, because the system is not automatic, you find that we've got Mamoloko, who previously was unemployed, as registered for an RDP. Mamoloko then gets a house, doesn't go into the system to update it that I no longer qualify or I no longer need a house, then remains on the database. But you'd find somebody who, for example, would have not registered for a house, then they need an issue. They would have registered on the one that we are talking about help me buy a house. So we're trying to improve on the system so that it can speak to all the processes that we are providing. So the numbers have gone up, yes, in terms of COVID, as people lost their jobs. So many became homeless, and that's why you'd have a lot of informal settlements having started. The process of dealing with disasters, which is floods, it's different. So if floods happen, we have got what we call emergency grants, where we provide, they become homeless. We provide temporary shelters, as you'd have heard Commissioner Nduli was talking about our process where we are reporting now to the Human Rights Commission on what we are doing. Temporary units, but also we provide permanent solutions for those. What is currently coming out more, especially with those, and also those who are sitting, for example, in former settlements that are closer to the rivers or under high voltage powers. People are complaining that people are putting themselves in dangerous areas so that they can jump the queue. So we're having that challenge now to say you are prioritizing KZN, and part of the issues that we're trying to deal with. People are saying you are prioritizing people who are affected by the disasters, but majority of them were sitting in informal settlements. We've registered. Now you are saying, because I've been disciplined not to go and evade land, now you are making me, even you are punishing me for being disciplined and respecting the law. So we're finding that coming through. So it's some of the challenges that we have. On the issue of quality for houses, NHBRC helps us to do the quality. So there are standards, whether it's temporary or permanent. We do have standards now. I know at the beginning, 1994, 1996, the quality was not there because we didn't have this work being done. But currently there is work that is being done. And for example, there are penalties. We've got what we call warranty fund. When a house has not been built properly, and we go and find within 5 years, if the RDP, what we call PNGs, has been built and then it's got defects, the contractor is obligated to pay and fix that damage. If it's after 5 years, we fix it under warranty fund. So there is a mechanism that is in place to protect the most vulnerable. on the issue of accessibility, we take note, we do accept and consider that it's because of the land. So you find in urban areas, for example, the closest of the land that you can find to build these houses, for example, you find we're building now in Sidibeng, we're building more in West Rand, in Gauteng, for example, you don't find more land within Johannesburg CBD unless we take over the buildings, but you can't build standalone. So there are South Africans who still believe in standalone houses. They don't want the apartments that we are doing. We're trying to convert some of the RDPs into apartments, but there isn't an appetite. We've got one project in Sidibeng. I had to call for communities to enroll into it because when they were allocated, they were refusing to go there because it's apartments. So we're saying it's RDP, but it's apartments that we are giving you for free. But they are refusing. They say, no, they want a standalone with a yard, not an apartment. And those are forcing us to build further. How we building closer? It's those apartment type that are closing, but we are making sure that it's accessible. We approach in different condition. The question, Prof, on what is it that we have identified as a major problem for us? And I think listening to Dr. Ngwane saying that it's not a problem, it is a problem for us because migration means that there's pressures for us. So it is a problem for us, migration, and I agree with the issue of rural economic development. We've got to be able to go and push for development, either through agriculture. There are quite a number of things that economies will stimulate the economy in the rural areas so that we spread. When you look at, and I'll make an example on some of the areas that we are starting to see growth in terms of economic development. You look at I don't know if many of you know the Vembe area around Musina. There's huge developments that are happening there. And we are seeing people moving back. Ordinarily, you'd not see people moving into those because it's seen as remote areas. But because of the Musina corridor and SCZ there, now you are seeing development within Nandoni Dam. It's hotels that are going to be built. It's estates that are being built. You look at the number of hotels that are being built. Now, those are stimulating the economy around that area and starting to get people to work there. And we believe that it will direct the traffic from urban areas back into that area in terms of, so I do agree, Prof, that we've got to try and ensure that economic development in rural areas happen. When you talk to communities, majority of them are not moving to urban areas because they want to. They are forced by conditions. They don't want to stay in poverty. They don't want to stay in an area where they can't have anything, where there's no access to opportunities. There's no schools that actually, you find one school in those areas. And that's why with human settlements, we're saying, even when we build within communities, we want to make sure that it's an integrated human settlement with all the facilities. So that's the first thing for us. Major one is that one. The second major problem for us is the illegal occupation of land. Illegal occupation of land deny us an opportunity as human settlement to plan properly, to budget properly, and to provide quality services. Because if somebody comes, as I say, they go and invade land, they stay under high power voltage, where if these cables can move, people will die. Now, we are forced then to intervene urgently, or they stay within the river banks, where they've put themselves. Floods come, they are taken over. If you look at the disasters, majority of the people who were affected were the people who have actually illegally occupied land. I had a discussion with the COVID-19. I know the specific 16 informal settlements that I had to have conversations with. Literally, I've had more than 6 meetings with them. One is that we say to them, you are staying where it's not safe. Can you move? They refuse. You go back and say, you can't. COVID-19 is one of them. And then when the disasters happened, when rain came, water was this high level. And I had to go back and say, but we advised it's not suitable here. Because this you illegally occupied, but it's a word. So they don't trust us when we say it's not suitable for human settlements. So it's a major challenge for us. And that's one of the things over the weekend as well. We are having a summit. We're trying to address. We're talking with communities. We bring in social facilitators. We bring in churches to help us. We bring in people within community to help us in conversation with communities. For example, one of the things with the disasters, these are bonded houses in KZN around Uku district. You find that these houses have been built below the water, what do they call it, the line in terms of the dams and the rivers, because you need 100-year line, I'll remember the terminology, flat line. Now they build there. You go and say, but guys, yes, it was flooded, but next time you're going to move with the river. Can we relocate them? They refused them. They refused to relocate. So I had to get them to sign indemnity form to protect the government. It's a painful thing I had to do, but because they are refusing, and you're saying this is a danger where you're sitting. Similarly happened with a community in George. They stayed there, but the land started moving for some reason. So the geologists are trying to understand. The land started moving, the RDP shook, so they cracked. We say, okay, we realize we put you here, whatever reason that could have been, we are investigating, but it's not safe for you to, I would want us to move you as quickly as possible, because 2 or 3 houses collapsed, lucky no one died. They refused. We got them to sign indemnity forms. So we go to that, I'm explaining this because these are the challenges that we face. Where communities resist, you say you are in danger, and you say, okay, because tomorrow I'll be called by Human Rights Commission, I'll be called by courts, what have you done? Now we've got to be able to say government did acknowledge that there's a problem here. We took action, we wanted an alternative, they've refused. I can't force them. So that's the major problem, which we think that as Human Rights Commission has this conversation in communities, it's one of the areas that can assist us to be able to educate the people, but also to say when these are identified, let's work together. So that's the issue. I've responded to the issue of the economic development in rural areas. The issue of communication, again, colleagues, I must say, it's a problem for government. That I acknowledge. Somehow we acknowledge, we identify it as government, but we never, sometimes we improve a bit, but I think either in terms of medium of communication, because there's quite a lot of things, as DM Matloba said, that are done, that are not known. You'd go, you showcase this, and then it's dampened down by the negative. So you can do 90% of good and 10% of bad is what comes in the public domain. That's what we are grappling with. We communicate, we issue pamphlets, we issue this, but still within the public domain, especially because our mainstream media tend to chase headlines. I'm former Minister of Communication and I shouldn't be saying this, but sometimes that's where the problem is. That you find we tend to chase headlines, which South African society tend to consume negativity more than positivity. That's where the problem as well is. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister. And I do think that some of the challenges that you are highlighting most probably are some of the things that the way forward of actually establishing Section 11 that will deal with water, sanitation, and human settlement is one of the things that the Human Rights Commission should take into consideration. DM, let me hand over to you.
No, thanks, my sister, and thanks to the input and the minister. Maybe because we're in a South African Human Rights Commission, I do agree with Prof. We're probably one of the bad people that are unable to communicate their storyline. And including the storyline of keeping ourselves together as people. You know, when it comes to Chapter 2 of the Constitution, which is about our rights, the Bill of Rights, we should not be fighting as South Africans. Because that Chapter 2 should be about what kind of a society we want to build, and there should be an agreement. Probably when you conclude your session, don't look at water as only a human rights issue. The water, from a communications point of view, Prof, it covers all the rights that are in the Bill of Rights. You know, access to water and its use, access to its use and opportunities. It does address the question of the right to life. If we give people water, it's a right to life because anyway, you can't live even just for a single day without water. But there are those that who are subjecting them to have no access to water for a number of months or days. It's like taking oxygen away. But when you look at water, you will not do anything, even just to do your enjoying your economic rights, because water is an input in terms of economic rights and production. And there are those who are still using water to actually have more water than others. Like we are taking a discussion with agriculture. Last week I was somewhere in Vembe, where the SEZ must be. They are using 88% of all the water available in that region, agriculture alone. Therefore, the right for others to participate in the economy just on the basis of no access is a problem. But the one that I like the most, Prof, is a right for young people like girls and our mothers and sisters, right to education. You know, many girl child, they could not go to school because they must go this long distance and go and find water. Some women can't participate in the economy because if there is no water, they can't be food, they can't cook. There are many other these associated rights. Probably when it comes to communication, I don't think we're doing well, including the right to environment, that must, like all these other issues. But maybe Thandeka, on your issue of effluent, what is a challenge in South Africa about the issue of management of sanitation? One of the problems we did, which was a good problem, we actually expanded to many people to have access to sanitation services. In other words, the sewer system where you can flush. The biggest problem that there was no kind of a proportionate investment or direct proportional investment on infrastructure that actually to do with sanitation services in line with the growth in population. Minister Gopaish is clear that the growth in population is because we are actually growing ordinarily in terms of people producing more. But there are people who are going to certain centers of the economy. And the infrastructure there was never actually being expanded to do. Even if the economy grows with a certain percentage, there is an impact on infrastructure. You know, in Tshwane, Prof, where the two of us come from, they decided to build something called the wastewater treatment plant. It's called Royval, and then there's also your timber treatment plant. You know, that one was designed only to receive about 100 and something megaliters, less than 150. As we speak, sitting here, they are receiving more than 170 megaliters, which is 170 million liters a day. The problem is that there was too much development. The more development was happening, they were connecting to the main system. And the main system was not actually being upgraded from A to Z. And you could see happening it everywhere. In areas where the sewer is running into the river, is a function that the infrastructure size is not adequate because the investment was not being done. Then there's a second aspect. If you actually have a Ferrari and you choose to go and drive it in a gravel, even how beautiful is the car, we are going to run down the car. That's what happened, Thandeka. The issues of management. There is an issue of lack of investment and planning on time, investing for growth. And then there's an issue that there is no management. Now we're trying to address that problem because in many of these townships and in many of these villages, sewer is no longer running into the rivers, but it runs into people's homes. And you know the stench that you can feel. I happen to have a big nose and I can smell from far. When I drive on N1, passing the valley, I can feel the capacity of the smell. Even if you drive the biggest kind of a sedan, it will be able to come through. Even if you are sleeping in a very beautiful bed in the still of the night, you can feel the smell. That's what is happening. And we are trying to say zero tolerance to spillages. Let's get the infrastructure to be fixed. But when we are fixing it, we are no longer fixing it to the same size. We are fixing it into taking into account the element that it may expand and grow. But then there's the other side that we are doing is that in as much as we are fixing the problem, you spoke about the sludge. Sometimes the sludge handling is not good. You can find the sludge is being thrown all over and so forth in many parts of our country. Our view is that we want to convert this waste into wealth. In other words, into brown economy. The technology is there. Other sectors, they don't need water that is treated to this level that we can drink. You can treat it to a particular level. You can do irrigation. You can do this thing of extraction of minerals. You know, the Zamazamas, they normally go to a sewer network. They actually cut the sewer network because they want the sewer water because it has certain a chemical and organic composition to extract the gold and other materials. We want them to use it. But the other thing, if you have the sludge can be converted into energy. And it can be converted into various forms of energies. This is what we are trying to promote. There should be nothing that is actually thrown into waste. And it's part of using the clean technologies that I thought we should talk about. The ratepayers, they are correct to demand that this government must perform. We are all ratepayers, and we all get angry when we don't get services. Sometimes there's no water where I stay in Pretoria. The kids, they write a memorandum and give it to the Deputy Minister of Water in my own house. Now water is not running, and my neighbors, they come and say there's no water. I'm not in the municipality. But I will have to stand up and say, no, they are correct. Citizens must demand the best out of us. And we must guarantee them the quality of services and assurance of supply. I'm in the same vein, we need to do that. And in instances where government doesn't respond, it's the constitutional democracy that we need to be able to respond. We know that they are holding back their taxes, and there are certain court decisions that have been made around this issue. I know there's a small municipality in the Northwest called Klengrefier. And I know it even at home in Mpumalanga, they do it there in Tabachune, everywhere. We should be able that, they should be value for money. Nami complain there was a load 6 shedding. Electricity was not there for a number of days, but my bill was the highest on that time. And where I stand, I don't have a view that we should not encourage them not to hold us accountable. The only issue that I have is when they started to take the asset as if it is their asset. It's not their asset. But in Northwest, we're intervening. Some work is happening there. The role of communities, I don't want to talk about Comrade Kenzane spoke. One of the biggest things that we do is to actually have certain services that have everything to do with human rights or the Bill of Rights. We politicize it. We must stop politicizing it, and the structures where communities get to be involved and the decision that needs to be made. I always believe that to be in government or to be a minister or deputy minister, it does not mean that you have the monopoly of wisdom, Prof. That's why President always talk about the issues of the social compact, the role of civil society, business, everybody to play their part. And that's how we work in the many projects. On the issue of accountability, there's been some instances where accountability is there, but we must agree that we have not done well in terms of consequence management in certain instances. In a number of times, the projects that were not completed on time, it was because of capacity. One of the things that has happened in government in our space is highly technical. Highly technical. you can't just bring someone to go and manage a space that needs a civil engineer, mechanical and electrical engineer, and you bring a technician. That's why in many municipalities, you find that even technical directors are not technical, but they are called technical directors. And their know-how is not up to the level that they can be able to know that if you are going to start an infrastructure project, you will have to produce an implementation readiness studies, you have to have all these other plans and so forth to do it. And then secondly, it has also been the function of what I call it, the abuse of procurement processes. Some companies, they come in at the lowest price on the basis that the company that actually has the lowest price is given the work. It does not necessarily mean that they will do the job. And some of them, because of COVID-19, the economy is not doing well. They don't even mind to come in and they think that they are going to do variation orders. And you come in that you find that the figure that has been given in terms of the BOQ, you cannot actually be below 20% of the actual price, while you are still going to manage the VAT and the other thing that you're going to do. You'll end up subsidizing the state. But at the very same time, you cannot actually be above 20% of the normal price. That's what's happening. Many of the projects are running at 60%, 70%. These companies, they've been liquidated. But Action, SIU in our cases there, go to Guyana. People have been arrested. The hawks are working in a number of these projects. There's an issue of bringing people into book. Sometimes it takes time because it's a complicated process. But in our own case, just to speed up implementation, each department, since last year, President made it a one minister standalone. We have a DG who's a civil engineer. We've appointed him, take time, the department, not DG for more than 5 to 6 years. All the DTG positions have been filled. We have a DTG here for supporting municipalities for water services, is a civil engineer. We are no longer taking chances to send people that are not fit for the purpose. In the meantime, to clean up the municipality is going to take time. That's why we're actually providing the water boards. We're working with the other countries to do those issues. The issues of, I think the issues of around the disruption of projects. The disruption, there are two levels of disruption that are happening now. The emergency of people demanding 30% for every project is the biggest challenge we face. And there's also the lack of understanding. Government is not communicating well. The 30%, there's a view that it means local. It does not mean local. The 30% mean that government wants to support SMMEs, led by women and young people in particular. But to say there's an issue of geographical determination is not the case in law. Probably government must be able to consider that, but it was meant to support small business. And the locals, even if a supplier comes in or a contractor, ordinarily they come with a preferred subcontract. By the time they go in there, immediately you bring these people, they discover this person is not from here. And they will disrupt the project. And one of the things that they are doing, which is criminal, they are no longer demanding 30% to work. They demand the 30% to go away with it. And you can give one group today, tomorrow the other group is going to come and demand the money. In other words, it's called extortion. And there's also a lot of intimidation that is happening there. Then there's a new phenomenon where some people, they come in there to actually pay what we call it protection fee. You know, where they come in, a contractor, its term has expired, they still want that contractor to remain. It ranges from ordinary members of communities to politicians that are in their pockets for business. Then there's a worrying component. The worrying component is the vandalization and attack of infrastructure. In our case, the biggest attacks are happening in the formerly mining towns, where some of the mines are abandoned. The zamazamas or illegal mining, They attack the water infrastructure because water is the biggest input, including the electrical infrastructure. That's why government, through President in the National Security Council, they are looking at that particular matter. In certain instances, they actually attack infrastructure and they do the mining when there's a biggest water pipe. An example here in West Rand, the biggest Rand water pipe. Remember, if you do gold mining, those machines for you need to cool it down. They go into illegal connection. Then there's no water coming out. Sometimes they are mining when there's a pipe that is actually a gas pipe or a refinery pipe that is underground. That's one of the issues, including when you go to Machabeng and others. The biggest vandalization of infrastructure is the biggest issue. And government has said criminality is criminality, we're dealing with it. But then there's an element of issues around reviving those particular economies, attending to social issues that are going there, including the violence that we've seen in certain areas that have happened. But the infrastructure attack is the biggest thing that we face as a country. And in what we are one of those that are mostly affected. But when you work with communities, I can tell you it makes a big difference. Around Mfuleni, we were spending too much money on security. We're not a department of security. We need to use the money for infrastructure, where they can just steal a pump station, they can steal everything that they are doing there. But communities are coming in, they are helping us, but also the law enforcement agencies are coming in because some of these people are highly armed. The kind of weapons they use, like AK-47. AK-47, you can't get it. You have to learn to be patient. Leadership is about tolerance. I'm concluding. I was asked, no, my apology, Chair. These matters of infrastructure attack is one of the issues that we need to be able to raise because it regresses the progress we've made. And if we don't attend to it, the rights to access to water and other services will be affected.
Colleagues and comrades, we are now sitting at 20 to 1, and it's now time for lunch. I am obligated to now close the session, unfortunately, because of time. But there are some major points that we managed to capture, and we will consolidate with the other scriber. But one thing that we did pick up for the sake of closure, it's just 6 bullet points. Number one thing that's coming out of this commission is the issue of modernizing our government into using innovative technology to start addressing issues of water, sanitation, and also housing. And then number 2, it's also the social compacting between the private sector and the state, and also getting more investments into the infrastructure of building water, dam reticulation, maintenance, etc., in order to feed into the domestic use and commercial use of water in the country. But that doesn't necessarily mean, as the Deputy Minister said, that we are going to privatize water. But it's necessary for us to start building those relationships because the state, when it comes to its fiscal monetary issues, we are running dry in this country. And then thirdly, the issue of migration. Housing made it very clear that the issue of migration is one of the most contributing factors to the inability of local government not being able to keep up with planning for infrastructure and also financing infrastructure. So the addressing of re-centralizing back to your rural economies in order to ensure that we curb the migration towards the cities. And let's be honest, comrades and colleagues, here as the majority of Black South Africans, we know that there is now a movement of young people who are actually going back to the rural areas, particularly as we are seeing in Limpopo, where there is now reinvestment into building homes and infrastructure. But what about us taking that economy back into those areas? And then fourthly, we understand that water is a human rights issue, and it's highlighted in the Constitution under Chapter 2 in the Bill of Rights, because it is an intersectional issue. And we must also appreciate the fact that we have not really taken much strides in providing a gendered analysis into the usage of water. And that was something that I used to encounter when I would be doing my research in local government, where you ask female councillors whether do they understand the gendered implications of them not providing services to households where females are the ones who are actually the ones who are using these services to cook, clean, and provide domestic work, etc. So that is another issue that we need to address in local government. Human Rights Commission, working with the Gender Commission, we should start thinking about how do we mainstream our water, sanitation, and also human settlements into this working paper on committee number 11. And then lastly, we would be actually looking at the most critical factor. In order to strengthen local government, we need to build the capacity. And we did hear that fortunately, the Department of Water and Sanitation has started to move towards decentralizing or delegating water boards back to municipalities in order to build that capacity that is lacking, especially in the infrastructure departments. And one of the ways in which we can start looking at that is how do we integrate that into the district development models? Because remember, from a decentralized perspective, district municipalities have the legislative mandate to provide water services. So how do we then make use of them by actually strengthening them with the necessary capacity so that they can support the local municipalities in order to avoid the kind of problems that we are having, especially around the issue of planning for water. So for me, comrades and colleagues, these are the major points that I've tried to jot down. But as like I said, we will be consolidating with the other scribers the most important factors that we need to bring into the outcomes of this commission. But anyway, on my note, I will have to say, as a chairperson, because I also make my observations, if there are members here who are coming from the Human Rights Commission, I think the way in which we can improve the way in which we operate in commissions is to give more time to participants to have discussions and to thrash out issues and also make contributions, because I did observe that there were too many panelists which were tried to be brought in together to address the different main issues. And yet at the same time, we find that some of the issues that they were addressing, they were intersectional. So maybe the second time around, we can cut our contributors maybe to 3, and we dedicate more time into the discussion, because this is ultimately one of the problems that we are saying, that we become a nation of talking, but very little time to explore innovation into the contributions that we should be making. So ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, my time is up.
Constructing or building a new state coming from, as it were, from our past is not easy. You can't do it with a stroke of a pen. I suggest, if she agrees, that inputs that were not made by members who are here should be allowed to trickle in so that it can be consolidated going forward. I mean, we're missing an opportunity here. I mean, 2 hours to talk about problems that were given to us yesterday, the whole day, and part of this morning, in 2 hours. Really, we are not really serious. No, we are really not taking this this process seriously. Thank you.
No, Chair, I think we need to agree with you. Tina, we want to engage. And maybe through the Human Rights Commission in the good work they are doing. I know that there's limited resources and staff, but on behalf of our own ministry, if there's a seminar, even if it can be hybrid or it can be virtual, because we don't hold the monopoly of wisdom around these matters. They affect people and their experiences, they matter. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those contributions. I have also noted them down and I will be submitting it to our commissioner. Comrades, we have come to the end. Colleagues, thank you very much for your time, for your patience, and for sticking around, even though we took longer and we have eaten into your lunch. But thank you very much to the DM, the Minister, our participants from the Northern Cape, the two doctors coming from the different research institutes. Thank you very much for your participation.
Okay. Leadership organize a proper engagement. Yeah.
Are you in the picture?
Okay. Okay. She's taller than me.
DM, I will definitely interact with you because I am doing an evaluation studies.
Okay. Okay.
Listen,
Let's communicate quickly. I'm just running out to Holland. And then when we come back, we can do it. And then we can put them just on a virtual platform. I have a brainstorming session, have a sense what they need. Then I can put up the teams to help them. Yeah. But please, let's do that. We can just do virtual because President is going to go there in October.
all right.
But we can do it within 2 weeks from now.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Ninja leadership.
Right. This one here.
Yes. Hey, that one, it doesn't want to. I've never seen a project that is nearly 10 years now.
Yeah.
And the mining sector has a lot of demand. That is corrupt. That's too much.
You're moving a lot.
Okay, we're trying to behave now.
Yeah.
Are you winning?
Yes.
No, spoken 11 minutes.
Can I please just ask one question very quickly? Uma was doing about because I think it was last year. Water sanitation and this is saying these daughters, the people who are selling their water rights. It was at the Constitutional Court.
I've not checked the outcome now.
No, the outcome is probably going to be end of the year, yes. But it just when you were speaking about agriculture, it triggered me.
You know, Yabantu who used to have water rights during apartheid.
Yes.
And what they do now, when there's a land reform, they want to sell it.
Yes.
And then now you'll have land, but you'll have no water.
Yes.
Or some of them, they have not been used, they want to transfer to another property. We're trying to handle it. It's so complicated.
Yeah.
But at the very same time, I don't think our lawyers were properly prepared because the law says that we must be able to redress the inequality and the injustice. Because if someone has too much and you have nothing, and they say it's a constitutional right that we have what,
Yeah.
it's a problem.
Yeah. Okay, then I'll keep an eye out. We spoke yesterday. I know. Yeah, it's kind of a big thing today. I have a question like this. You're not a medical doctor, right? No. Yes. Oh, you're at the end. And there's a lot of writing. That's what I'm learning. Okay, that already.
You know what was fortunate about this? I got a scholarship to go to, so I did my PhD for 3 years. So no work for me, just concentrating on my PhD. So first year, next year, we were trying to figure it out. That's also literature review, getting ready to go and present. Then last year was the right time. But I discovered that you do submit. One of them going to fix this fixes. Then when you finally make the submission, great.
But for today, they're done.
Your external examiner examines you.